According to a survey carried out by the National Agency for the Control of HIV and AIDS, correspondent Theophilus Enama has details.
HIV is a virus that targets and alters the immune system, increasing the risk and impact of other infections and diseases. It is mainly transmitted through unprotected sexual intercourse with a carrier. So far, there is no cure, but early detection and medication is considered the most acceptable remedy that could reduce the risk of death to the barest minimum. Globally, it is estimated that 36.7 million people are living with HIV and AIDS, and 25.5 million of these are in sub-Saharan Africa. This is according to a 2016 survey carried out by UNAIDS. The agency also mentioned that in sub-Saharan Africa alone, adolescent girls and young women accounted for 25% of new HIV infections among adults, and women accounted for 56% of new HIV infections among adults in 2015.
I'm happy that this exercise is in that direction, to enable the women and girls to be self-sufficient economically so that they won't be desperate and get into unsafe exercises because of economic situation.
Fumi Okafor has been living with HIV for 19 years. She is one of the 50 beneficiaries of this empowerment scheme organized by the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, NACA.
Before I know my HIV status, I'm married, my husband. It happened that my husband gets sick, and after taking him to hospital, we got to know that he didn't tell me initially that he was HIV positive. He just told me that he's having cough, but there's some rashes all over his body. But later he passed on. So after he passed on, I started sick, and I went for a medical checkup. I was diagnosed HIV positive.
As of then, in 2001, at that early stage, when the thing was not too, the stigma was much, most especially in the facilities, there in the hospital, like the nurses, the doctors, everyone getting more than was, the way they stigmatize.
Joining me now is HIV advocate Gbenga Alabi. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
It's a pleasure coming around.
All right, now, according to the report, 1.9 million Nigerians are still living with HIV and AIDS, and a majority of that percentage are women. Why is that, and how is that?
What a good question. In the research of it, we won't say that God is actually partial, but looking at the physiology and also the anatomy of the woman, she's open and very exposed, unlike a man that has actually a tiny opening, and that is actually responsible to the high prevalence of HIV among the women folk. That is not to say that the men actually are protected because of their narrow opening. But in the reasons of it, you have to look at the women. Women in this part of the world, especially in the sub-Sahara, are more vulnerable because of so many other reasons. We cannot, shy away from the fact that poverty is actually prevalent in this part of the world. Apart from the fact that the young girls actually experience sex at a very early age, unlike a man. Yes, there is no doubt that the women folk are vulnerable. Yes, in terms of vulnerability, we can also not run away from the fact that the man has sex at the instance of a young lady, and this makes the number very high.
So now, in dealing with the HIV AIDS issue, some have said that the issue of service charge is also a major problem. Can that be removed?
Yes, let me start by actually appreciating the present government by actually addressing HIV holistically. Because if actually you are just preventing HIV infection and not addressing the transmission, it might be an issue. The government is actually trying to see how it can actually reduce the cost of treatment. And that's why the private sector have been actually advised to come in. The private sector, which I work for, we are actually exploring the possibility of actually reducing some of these costs by providing some commodities, which include the testing kits and also treatment kits. This will no doubt reduce the cost of treatment when it comes to addressing HIV holistically, which I mentioned earlier on.
And another aspect is the fact that some persons do not have access in terms of the terrain which they find themselves. How much effort is your body doing to ensure that they get into these areas?
I work for NIBUCA. NIBUCA stands for Nigerian Business Coalition Against AIDS. It is the private sector response to HIV and AIDS. And you all agree with me that the private sector have the resources and the core competence of actually addressing any issue that comes on their table. They are highly proactive. And for us, we are actually working in tandem with the government because government can't do it all. And that's why we're actually working with government at all levels of intervention to ensure that health facilities have enough equipment, drugs are there, and treatment opportunities are actually given to people who doesn't know their status. The starting point for us is for Nigerians to get to know their status. Under the 1995 strategy, the first 95 is actually talking about 95% of people who have HIV to get to know their status. If I get to know my status, then if I'm positive, I'll go on treatment regimen. Then if I'm on treatment, then the virus is going to surprise. It's going to be suppressed.
Gbenga Alabi, I know if we allow you keep going on and on about this, but we have limited time, so we have to leave it at this point. Thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, moving on now, over 1.9 million Nigerians are said to be living with HIV/AIDS.
And while this figure is staggering, it's important to note that women form the greater percentage. And this is according to a survey carried out by the National Agency for the Control of HIV and AIDS. Correspondent Theophilos Elama has more on that report.
HIV is a virus that targets and alters the immune system, increasing the risk and impact of other infections and diseases. It is mainly transmitted through unprotected sexual intercourse with a carrier. So far, there is no cure, but early detection and medication is considered the most acceptable remedy that could reduce the risk of death to the barest minimum. Globally, it is estimated that 36.7 million people are living with HIV and AIDS, and 25.5 million of these are in sub-Saharan Africa. This is according to a 2016 survey carried out by UNAIDS. The agency also mentioned that in sub-Saharan Africa alone, adolescent girls and young women accounted for 25% of new HIV infections among adults, and women accounted for 56% of new HIV infections among adults in 2015.
I'm happy that this exercise is in that direction, to enable the women and girls to be self-sufficient economically so that they won't be desperate and get into unsafe exercises because of economic situation.
Fumi Okafor has been living with HIV for 19 years. She is one of the 50 beneficiaries of this empowerment scheme organized by the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, NACA.
Before I know my HIV status, I'm married, my husband. It happened that my husband gets sick, and after taking him to hospital, we got to know that he didn't tell me initially that he was HIV positive. He just told me that he's having cough, but there's some rashes all over his body. But later he passed on. So after he passed on, I started sick, and I went for a medical checkup. I was diagnosed HIV positive.
And as of then, 2001, at that early stage when the thing was not too, the stigma was much, most especially in the facilities, there in the hospital.
Joining me now is HIV/AIDS advocate Gbenga Alabi. It's good to have you join us right now.
Thank you. It's
all
nice
right.
being here.
Now, one of the earlier survey carried out showed that Nigerians living with HIV were around the figure of 3.2 million. But the latest now shows that we're 1.9 million people living with HIV. We also know that there is no cure for HIV yet, except for management. How do the figures drop when we have a prevalence at this level and then after another survey, the figures drop? Talk to us.
Thank you very much. It's nice to know that the prevalence of HIV and AIDS in Nigeria has actually dropped from 3.0, to 1.4. The recent survey just released in March this year by the federal government, being conducted by NACA in conjunction with some consortium with the support from UNAIDS, Global Fund, and USG government, actually has shown that the prevalence has actually dropped. The question is, how come about the reduction in the prevalence.
Yeah.
Yes. The National Agency for the Control of AIDS, which is NACA, is a multi-sectoral coordinating body responsible for HIV program in Nigeria. And under the multi-sectoral response, we have various organs, we have various units, which actually is responsible for the prevention and control of HIV in Nigeria. And part of it is actually my organization, that is NIBUCA, which is the private sector response to HIV and AIDS. So we have the multi-sectoral response being driven by NACA. Apart from the multi-sectoral response being driven by NACA, we also have other partners who is also working in tandem with the government of Nigeria. Among them is the USG government. Also, we have other platforms actually supporting the response in Nigeria. We have the Global Fund. The Global Fund actually pumped in a lot of resources so as to ensure that the prevalence actually dropped to where we are today.
So when it comes to the idea of the figures dropping, which means that the number of people who have HIV, AIDS have reduced, does that mean that those who were infected before had died and then we don't have new infections, or how does that translate?
We're actually looking at the burden of HIV. Okay. In terms of those who actually, in terms of the burden, now we have 1.9 against 3.5. What that translates into is that we have a reduction in the number of people actually coming up with HIV. It's not that they have actually died. They are still on treatment in the real sense of it as drugs. But then, in terms of burden, we have a reduction in the burden from 3.0 to 1.9. And that's as a result of the multi-sectoral response being driven by the coordinating body.
All right. Well, when it comes to the issue of awareness, how aware Nigerians are concerning issues of HIV, remember in the 90s, there was a massive enlightenment campaigns across the world, and people really got knowledge of what HIV is and all of that. But if you compare to now, how aware would you say Nigerians are regarding HIV, how to prevent, and then where to go when they have all of these?
Yes, good. In the 90s, especially in the early 90s, yes, the awareness was very high. But in terms of behavioral change, it does not translate into the behavioral change. Okay. But after the mid-90s, we discovered that there's need for us actually to change the strategy so as to match awareness with behavioral change. And this we are able to achieve.
All right. We have to leave it here now. Bengalabi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.